Halito, and welcome to Native Chalk Talk, a podcast by natives for all. Here we're keeping our Native ancestors' stories and history alive, while also sharing with you our Native culture, traditions, and more. I'm Rachel Youngman, a Choctaw originally from Anadarko, Oklahoma. I hope you'll enjoy this journey with me as we learn from our Native American guests. And I hope you'll do me a favor. Feel free to like and share these episodes. I so appreciate it. Yakoki. Now, let's switch gears just a bit. I'd like to hear about both of your backgrounds, tribes, and ancestral stories. Robert, let's start with you. What can you tell us about your tribes?
The term we would use is First Nation. And in Canada, I'm registered with the Kwantlen First Nation. And in the
Mhm.
States, I'm enrolled with the Nooksack Indian tribe. And they're in different countries now, but if you go back 200 years, they're right next door to each other.
Yeah, where were they? Were they further up north or were they is considered the
Metro
United States?
Vancouver.
Okay.
So they're part of the Coast Salish people. And the Coast Salish homeland is what's now called the Cascadia Megalopolis. So it's a combination of metropolitan areas that goes from Vancouver through Seattle, Tacoma, down to Portland. Well, almost.
Okay.
It's like 11 million non-natives on our homeland. Um, so anyways, the Kwantlen people it's a word in the Hunkaminam language that means the tireless runners. And right now we are under a hereditary chieftainship form of government with no elected council
Oh.
and dictatorship, as you might say. I'm in court because of that. So
Because
I
you're
got
trying to change that or
so I got a whole bunch of people together and we analyzed the rules of a hereditary system. We exercised those rules, and according to those rules, we removed the hereditary chief. She disagrees. The federal
of
government, of
course.
course, agrees with her. And so we're in court. She's suing us.
Oh
So
my
we'll see how that
goodness.
goes.
So Angel, I don't know about you. I know so much more about the tribes that are in the United States, especially the Plains tribes is where I'm more knowledgeable, but I am so far behind on the Canadian First Nations people, and I have so much to learn. So Robert, thank you for sharing this. And I had no idea that there was ever a First Nations people that had that kind of bloodline type of leadership. Is that common up there?
It's not a legitimate form of leadership. It was something that was imposed under
Oh,
the Indian Act, which is the bill that created reserves and
okay.
everything.
Right.
There's about 20 left that have it.
And are they all in Canada?
Yeah, yeah. Well, no, there's 20 left under the Indian Act that have it. I don't know how many in the States have it.
Okay.
I don't think there's any after the Indian Reorganization Act in the States that have that form of government, because under the Indian Reorganization Act, I think they were imposing Western style government.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Okay. So the person, this female that's been in charge, there's a lineage that goes back how far, like when was the first leader of her family put into position?
Um, well, I mean, there was a break in her line, and this, by the way, is like my second cousin. Um, so the
The
first,
plot
I guess,
thickens, y'all.
yeah, would be like in the 60s, but um, it gets really complex. We had the Catholic Church trying to impose their own system of government on top of the reserves with like this role called watchmen, and they had church chiefs. And I think my understanding is that her family came from one of those church chiefs around the early 1900s.
Okay.
Anyways, she's
My
not, but
my jaw is dropping.
our system pre-contact is the closest thing is anarcho-capitalism. We're like extremely capitalist and extremely anarchic. So
Okay.
there's no idea, like it's just families as corporations running things. Whoever is the most influential and the richest is in charge at any
Okay.
given moment, but nobody has any coercive authority. So the idea of like a chief acting like a little king is absurd. And it just comes from the federal government who has a king. So it sort of makes sense to them, not to us. It's not.
Yes. Okay.
It reminds me a lot of that era in, the like if for the Oklahoma tribes, we had that era where the federal government picked out our chiefs for us, the guy they wanted to deal with, and you're our man in charge, and we'll come to, and so that, yeah, that reminds me a lot of that kind of thing.
Good point.
Yeah. And we
Yeah.
just have the last vestiges of that. We're knocking them down one by one. And I think that this is the last largest one. And once she's gone, we're going to establish in law that the Longhouse has the authority to do this if we succeed in court. And that'll take down another 10.
So we're cheering you on, and we'll be thinking of you guys. Be sure to maybe give us an update at some point if you can, Robert.
I will.
This like fun fact about Robert is one of the things that I was like, oh my gosh, I totally want to work with these guys. Like in my last few years, I helped advocate for my tribe to change their own constitution through a citizen referendum, like power of the people, by the people, for the people. And it's like, oh wow, this is like a fun little circle I want to like be in and absorb some of the energy from, because it's very interesting. And with like the Muscogee Creek Nation, another thing that's always been something I don't know, journalism's kind of just a blood in the blood thing. If anything is like, maybe Guillaume likes to be in the forest. Well, journalism's in my blood, I guess. Telling stories and really just documenting my community. I love that. I spent times with the archives as a young person, and I learned to read from newspapers. And so I just see that value of informed citizenry and how much progress can happen. And I grew up not exactly knowing what being a member of a tribe was about. I remember as a kid seeing the tribe's trucks come to my father's property, and they helped put in a cistern to bring water to our home. And I thought, what is this? And this is incredible that, you know, here we were, some people who, my family spent all their money building a house, and when the well water was toxic because of oil rigs and stuff like that, what do you do? And who's there to help? And the answer was this tribe was there to help. And I kind of became obsessed with that as a young person, and wanting to, I don't build houses or water systems though, but I do know news, and I do know newspaper. And so that was a way, when the opportunity presented itself, I plugged in that way. And by being plugged into my tribe, I learned that back in my family history, there was a man named Jackson Barnett. This is like, would be my grandma's great uncle, right? So this is kind of far back, but he was considered one of the richest Indians in the world. He had allotment land, oil was found on it, but he funded the Crazy Snake Rebellion, where Chito Harjo went to the nation's capital, to Washington, D.C., and he spoke on behalf of tribal sovereignty, and that you guys shouldn't be picking our chiefs for us. My ancestor funded that, and the federal government said, oh, nay, nay, we're having none of this. You are now a ward of the government, and we will take you over. Like, they took his possession, his wealth, into trust, and he became a ward of the government. And so I'm like, there's some stirring rebellious folks in my family, and I felt like I had to get in the mix and kick a few nests, hornets from time to time.
And what's interesting is that you found that fascinating at a young age. And I think not everybody does start trying to learn all of that stuff when they're younger. I was kind of like you, where I was like, oh, this is fascinating. History is fascinating. Native American history is fascinating, not just because I'm part Native, but and it doesn't matter what age you are, you can start learning. But Angel, in your writing and the things that you guys are doing with Pretendians, this is a great way for all of us to learn, myself included. Obviously, I just learned some new, very fascinating facts about our First Nations people up in Canada. Good stuff there.
It's
wow,
like,
what a history.
On the one hand, I hope we get to do more episodes of our podcast. On the other hand, I hope we do such a good job that people are so well informed there's not a need.
True.
Like, maybe it impacts some systems, and that we fix some issues, and this isn't such an existential crisis to our community, because like the day we released our first episode was the same day that, you know, forums were being held on on Indigenous identity, and they were talking about this. It was like in the headlines as well. So it was very
Wow.
timely. And I
Crazy.
don't think the world at large knows anything about this real pressing issue that's coming, that we're battling.
Well, you guys are doing good work out there then. And speaking of work, so Robert, your own background, what was your focus of study and career and all that?
Um, in junior college, I did anthropology and physical anthropology, where it crosses into forensics.
Fun.
And then in uni, I did um, poli-sci with a minor in history, did a bit of criminology. I went on a teaching certificate and I started doing some post-grad studies, but then I quit it because it's too busy.
Oh, I hear you on that. And you started doing this kind of thing, right? Do you write full time or do podcasts
No,
full time?
right now I'm wrapping up a contract with a charity that manages that runs entrepreneurial programs for people from low-income communities.
Oh,
So
wonderful.
I led our indigenization initiatives and got us to partner with the different local First Nations to help to connect with their own entrepreneur training programs to bring them into our program and provide mentorship and microloans and help develop their businesses.
That
So that's the day job. But in the other job, I have a new company called Knowledge Keeper, which I'm setting up, which uses big data to create something like a Bloomberg terminal for Indigenous consultation. And a Bloomberg
oh,
terminal, if you don't know, is a data app where you could put in any. So with ours, you could choose any place, and it'll pull up every single Indigenous consultation and everything about every key Native person there, Native history, land use plans, all of that, all condensed and into a single easy to read report, so that you um, build or develop in an area with a clear idea of what you're doing.
and how can people find that? Is it out on the app stores now?
Oh, it's prohibitively expensive. No, it's not on the App Store. It's still in an invitation-only test phase.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. Well, another thing that you'll have to keep us updated on and love to share when you go live, and really exciting stuff you're doing there.
Hmm.
Well, last time we spoke, you talked about your uncle and wanted to share some about him and the history of your family.
I had this one uncle, and his name is William Peter, and he recently died. And they found his body on a very poor neighborhood in not a good place.
Hmm.
And because my brother had recently gone through a naming ceremony, he's prohibited from dealing with death in any way. So it fell on me, of all the cousins, it fell on me to be responsible for taking care of him, my late uncle. So I had to coordinate everything and all this stuff and coordinate our ceremonies and stuff. Now, what's interesting about this uncle is that he grew up in a little fishing village where our family grew up in, and we believe, had autism. That's what we can get from talking to everybody. One day he's out swimming, and he's out swimming with a neighborhood boy who is not native. The neighborhood boy drowns. The neighborhood boy dies. And everybody in the community, all the non-natives, rise up and demand the police do something about these Indians who just killed a boy, because they blame him because he's weird and he's native. And so the police come and take him away and send him to a pig farm. And the family doesn't see him again for 20 years or so. And that what happens to him is something that in Canada we call the 60s scoop. And that's where the government just basically threw out any rules they had about seizing Native children, and at a drop of a hat could take you away from your family forever. And that's what happened to him. And it ruined his life. And from there onwards, nothing good happened. And he took it out against the family. He burned down our house twice.
Oh,
Um, and so because he had that animosity towards the family, we never really brought him back in. And I think that what happened to him is just such a good example of how that system of oppression, in this case, the 60 scoop, which is a cousin to the residential schools or boarding schools like you have there, is just destructive to a family and destructive to Native society. And also the way we're dealing with them, I think, shows how Natives culture is dealing with these sorts of issues going forward. So, I don't feel it would be right to give him a full native ceremony because I don't know what his faith was. But it's clear that it probably wasn't ours. So instead, we are going to hold a secular version of our ceremonies, and we're going to return him to the waterway where the boy died, because in our understanding, that's the last moment when he was happy. So that's, yeah. So that's one of the uncles.
Oh, my goodness. And thank you for shedding light on something that I also didn't know about, that 1960s scoop, especially when there were mental health issues involved. He probably never even got the help or support that he may have needed on top of that.
Yeah, there is a huge gap in services for Native youth who have mental health issues, especially schizophrenia and autism.
We'll be back after this quick break. Are you looking for the perfect gift for your significant other, your bestie, or even yourself? You know you're worth it. Luxury soaps, lotions, and lip balms from Baker's Bar Soapery are 100% Choctaw crafted, and they make the perfect gifts. This work of art is their signature turquoise soap, and it's made to look like Sleeping Beauty turquoise. Do you see this gold veining throughout? And the gold marbling on top? Love it. Next, check out this apple mint custom fragrance oil soap called Say Their Name. And all proceeds go to the missing murdered Indigenous women Choctaw cause. You'll only find this blend made specifically for this soap. And yes, these are made with goat's milk, which leaves your skin feeling soft and supple. So load up on these Choctaw soaps made by Tiffany at Baker's Bar Soapery at thebbsoapery.com. But be sure to get 20% off when you use the code NATIVECHOCTAW, that's all caps, when you spend $25 or more. Treat yourself to the luxury your skin deserves with Baker's Bar Soapery.
You also spoke about a certain tribe and a person who was instrumental in re-registering the tribe. And I believe there was a certain volcano involved in that story. What can you share with us about that?
Well, there's always a volcano involved. It's
Of
Northwest.
course.
There are active volcanoes around every major city in this region. There's active volcanoes on both sides of Portland, both sides of Seattle, both sides of Vancouver. So there's always a volcano. The uncle, so on the Nooksack side of the family, well, actually, it's the same side of the family. I'm registered with the Nooksack tribe. The Nooksack tribe was one of those tribes that lost its federal status for decades and decades and decades. And the reason that is when they're rounding everybody up to put them on res, they didn't go. They stayed in their mountains. They went up the volcano, our lovely local volcano called Colshan, or in English, Mount Baker. So they avoided that, but they still remain together as a community. So this one ancestor who is like a great uncle, his name is Joe Louis, but his proper name is Sacklety, which is the name also my uncle and my brother have. He is the one that fought for federal recognition, and he's the one that eventually got federal recognition for the Nooksack to restore them as a federally recognized tribe with, vast lands and everything like that.
That's fantastic. I have to admit, like I said earlier, many of us here in the States just don't know nearly as much as we should about the First Nations people of Canada, and we have much to learn. Now, Angel, you're Muscogee Creek, and obviously you live in my home state of Oklahoma. So tell us about your background. I hear you had a documentary that went to Sundance, so do tell.
Yeah. I kind of mentioned a little bit about journalism always kind of being in the sphere. I learned to read from a newspaper. My grandpa would read it every day, and I would get sweet treats if I could read an article. As I got older, I became kind of obsessed with how I needed that information. My grandpa would take me to look at the printing presses running in the windows of the Tulsa World, and my hometown, not Tulsa. I live in Tulsa now. I used to live in Henrietta, and they used to run these presses in this big window, and you could watch the paper go through. I was just obsessed with journalists. I also grew up in the rural, like, Okmulgee County area, and some weird things happened. Different murders in very close proximity. And I remember going into town every Saturday. You go into town to buy groceries or whatever. I live 7 or 8 miles outside of town. And I would always get that newspaper and follow up looking for, did they find that bad guy? Or is that bad guy still out on the, real big obsession.
Right.
I grow up, I become a journalist. I'm 20 something years old. And Rebecca Lansbury Baker, who was the editor of the Muscogee Creek Nation's newspaper, she strolls into my office one day, and she's this bubbly, vibrant Native woman. And she's like, "Hey girl, I hear you're Creek, and I think that you're doing a bang up job, and we really need your help because we're going to build this thing here." And I was like, right on, let's do this. It was an opportunity. That's when I started really learning more about my past, was my 20s, because I had kids by then, and I'm like, man, I really don't know all that I should know, and how can I teach them? Little did I know that we would run into this thing where, our government doesn't always necessarily want everything communicated very, very clearly. And a couple years in, I did something that had never been done. I took cuff and stuff pictures of our own tribal officials being arrested for embezzlement, and we put that on the front page of our newspaper.
Wow.
And it blew people's minds, and it got me a pink slip. I got fired. And I went back to my home. Yeah, I got an award for the story. It was like the first award-winning story I ever wrote, and I got fired for it. And I was like, damn, I don't know what I'm going to be doing with my life. This is weird. So fast forward to me being back at the tribe, and we were doing good news, and it was a very well-oiled machine. Generations of people built this, and we pressed the envelope. And then the McGirt case goes into the Supreme Court, and we started asking a lot of questions, and our tribal leader and our police force didn't say the same thing. Our tribal leader said, "Oh, this is not a big deal. It's going to be fine." Our light horse police chief said, "This could be catastrophic if we don't get funding.
Because it'd be a whole new set of huge amount of people coming in that won't be taken in on the state level. It'll be the federal level, which is the Native.
Right.
Okay, interesting.
So the police chief was looking forward, say, we win this thing, we're going to need money to police 11 counties where we haven't done so before. And
absolutely.
Our newspaper, I didn't do the story, another journalist did, but he did such a good job that the state of Oklahoma quoted our newspaper against the tribe. So it's a weird spot to be in. And the tribe's answer to that was, let's shut the newspaper up. They're talking too much. It's making life hard. We need to win this case. And so they censored us. And that started a 3-year battle to create a citizen referendum and alter our constitution so that it had a free press protection. And so we were pretty good at communicating with the audience already, but we started getting really candid with the audience. We started telling them, the reason you're not seeing the stories you want to see is because we're not allowed to publish them. They pay our bills. We can't do anything contrary. They have their man in place to keep the news from getting to you. Right. And the citizens took that. And we had an election cycle where the citizens did not stop asking about press freedom. Every single one of those candidates who were running in that election had to stand and deliver on that topic. And it turned over our government. Every single vote that went against press freedom, they were voted out of office. And they voted in a super majority of 66.6% to uphold press freedom for our nation. And while we were doing that, because we had no idea what the outcome would be, we were filming a documentary about it. And it went to Sundance. It world premiered in 2023 in Sundance, and we took home the Special Jury Freedom of Expression Award. And that just blew my mind.
I've got goosebumps, y'all. This is so cool.
It's now available on BBC Storyville. You can, for the very first time in the last 24 hours, you can now stream it from BBC Storyville and watch it if you want. And we're advocating through the Indigenous Journalists Association to help more tribal media and more outlets, more tribes adopt good policy. We're collecting the policy that exists, examining it, looking for ways to make it stronger, and identifying the communities who are ready to advocate for themselves. Because what we learned is, on one hand, we could have gone and appealed to the feds and asked them to hand down some kind of law and said this is unconstitutional. Sure. But it's more powerful if we as sovereign nations handle our business ourselves. So we wanted to do that from the inside, from our people. And we've identified that the best way to create change in our organizations. And there's some boundaries to that, but there's also some places that are very ripe to have these conversations. And it's just a matter of kind of helping them kickstart their own campaigns and do the same. We outlined a model with that documentary of how to do it. And we're using that to impact other nations if they want.
That's incredible. Your tribal members spoke, and this is what they wanted. And this is what Robert's fighting for too, to where the people can vote in what they're wanting. It's kind of a sticky situation, isn't it? Because
it was so hard.
Oh my God, right? You're worried about your job and your even reputation.
Biggest fear was that once we did the film and once the world's seen it, because, you know, as Indigenous nations, we don't always like to show the negative things, because the world at large is always pushing against us. We try to put our best face forward. My biggest fear was that somehow it wouldn't be accepted by my community and that I would become like this lone. I would have to go to the forest. Like,
you'd have to go to the forest and you see Guillaume there.
But it worked out okay. All the aunties gave me the high five, and so I'm happy.
That's great. That's great. Well, the aunties, thank you, aunties. But you know, I think a lot of people, because they see Native Americans as only victims, they may not know that there is also corruption in our governments too, just like there is in our government today here in the United States or in Canada. So, I mean, corruption can be anywhere that someone is wanting power and money. There's always going to be something like that follows. I am so proud of you. I didn't even know it went this deep, Angel. That is really cool. And that's why both of you were meant to meet on top of everything. What a story. By the way, listeners, Angel is the recipient of many awards for her work in media journalism and more. So we're cheering her on. And last but not least in our discussion today, I must bring up your pug, Pepe. He decided to stop in and see us today. So those of you who are not on YouTube, you should go over there so you can see him. Oh, hi, Pepe. He's like camera shy. Pepe, there he is. Oh my God, he's beautiful. I love his face.
Oh. My pets are kind of like me. We're just loaves of bread that want to lay around.
I wish my dog was a loaf of bread. She wants to go for walks all the time. Anyway, well, I'm sure it takes quite a team to produce such a great show like Pretendians. I'd like to thank Maggie Taylor for introducing me to you two. And who are some of the other folks you'd like to call out for the great work that they've done on your show?
Karen Pulazy is the editor-in-chief. There was Caleb and James and Alan and Mitra and Jesse. Big team effort, and they were very much cheering it on. I forgot Julie Shapiro. Last but definitely not least.
Last but not least, Julie, thank you.
You forgot to thank our most important partner, robots.
Oh, yes.
Thank you,
AI created the great theme songs, which I think is hilarious.
Oh, they're fantastic. Yes.
And when I think about AI and how AI learns, and it just kind of filters in whatever exists, this is something for the natives to pay attention to, because it can only absorb what's out there in the mainstream, right? And so it can only absorb the stereotypes. And so these songs are stereotypical and terrible, and they're funny as hell.
It's so funny. Oh my gosh. Again, that native humor. So thank you, bots. And thank you to your team that did. I'm just so impressed with the great work that y'all have all done out there, from the writing to the marketing and branding and all the stories that you're telling. So thank you both for taking time to share about yourselves, your families, and about Pretendians. I appreciate what you're doing out there, bringing awareness to this issue. And it truly is an issue. Before we go, are there any words of wisdom you would like to share with our listeners? Angel, I'll start with you.
My very best advice to give is to never let your kids know when you're recording in the bathroom closet, or they will blow it up before you go in.
Ooh, I'm seeing a story here somewhere. Wise words from Angel today. Thank you, Angel, and to your children as well. How about you, Robert?
A wise word. I would say that I just checked out Angel's documentary on BBC World. It's only available in the UK, but a wise man once said, download a VPN and then you can access it.
Oh, there you go. Okay, good to know, everybody. So I'd like to end on the thoughts of His Excellency Guillaume Carle, who said in his interview with Robert that when you go on the other side, you'll have to apologize to him, Robert. I hope you'll always remember those words. So wise. Actually, let's end on a better note here. From a Hopi proverb, let your eyes be offended by sight of lying and deceitful men. Stay truthful, listeners, and Jago Kwantlen. Thanks for listening to Native Chalk Talk. Be sure to join our community on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and check us out at nativechalktalk.com. Stay tuned for the next episode. You're going to love it. Jago Kwantlen. Thank you, my friends. Thanks for listening to Native Chalk Talk. Be sure to join our community on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and check us out at nativechalktalk.com. Stay tuned for the next episode. You're going to love it. Jago Kwantlen. Thank you, my friends.